The Charlotte Hornets are playing more competitive basketball, but they still end up losing to the Phoenix Suns on the road this time after a long break because of the postponed games against the LA squads. Mark Williams balls out in the first half against Phoenix. What do we make of his season so far? That's all to come today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. There's Doug Branson. Find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. There you can find his subtext information. He also hosts Locked On NBA. I know you're telling the people that listen to Locked On NBA to make that their first listen, so tough choice, Doug. What do they make their first listen? What do they make the first listen? You tell the people what you got for them.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just made me think about that. I might have to find some way to rephrase that because Locked On NBA now it's an odd bird because we split the show. There's Locked On NBA that I do. We're the flagship show. And then there's a Locked On NBA game night, which I feel like would be maybe the last listen, so maybe we are the first listen. I don't know. I have to figure this all out.
Okay, but yeah, you do that.
You know, dealer's choice, honestly.
You do that. I'll still tell you to make us your first listen. I'm Walker Mehl. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Make that your midday listen. Just do that. As long as you join us in the midday, then you're doing a nice job. Real quickly, want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game time? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Thanks again to Game Time for helping us out on today's episode. Plus, this episode and this podcast, we now have a newsletter introducing the Locked On Hornets Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Hornets newsletter. Well, after a long break, an unexpected break for a little while, the Hornets have their games against the Lakers and the Clippers on the road postponed due to the devastating wildfires. It's something once the Lakers game was postponed, we figured that the Clippers game was going to be postponed as well, given one, the NFL wildcard game that was going to be in Inglewood where the Rams play. That game had already been decided that they were going to play in Glendale, and this was before they were even supposed to suit up against the Clippers Saturday. That game's on Monday, so, it made sense. The Hornets don't have a back-to-back, actually, so they play the Phoenix Suns. It was supposed to be the second night of a back-to-back, but instead they play Phoenix after what is a pretty long layoff for them. They still end up losing 120 to 113. This game was defined by Mark Williams just being an absolute monster, just a monster in the first half. He had 20 points, over 20 points, and he had 13 rebounds going in to the locker room. Now, he would stall out in the second half. Mark Williams only ended up with 24 points and 16 rebounds overall in this game. LaMelo Ball had 25, 9 of 25 from the field, 5 of 17 from three-point land. But again, they end up losing 120 to 113. And the Hornets, you talk about stalling out, their offense stalled out in the fourth quarter, only scoring 15. Some no calls down low. It feels like we've been having, the Hornets have always been accused of never getting the call right. Like, the officials are going to give the other stars their star calls, and there's going to be no fouls called against the Hornets, and that's going to frustrate us. It feels like we've been getting that a little more this season, in my opinion, than we even have the last couple. But some controversial no calls here at the end of the game as well. What'd you make of this game where the Hornets lost to the Phoenix Suns, Doug?
Yeah, I don't think it was the officiating. I think there were some execution issues by the Charlotte Hornets at the end of the game. I think you're right. You're dead on that Mark Williams stalled out. I thought he ran out of gas. I thought he gave huge performance in the first half and really propelled the Hornets and helped them get a lead. But then in the second half, 12 minutes of play, 2 points, 0 of 2 shooting, 3 rebounds, 1 assist. And then I thought he just generally looked a step slower. Particularly, there was he let Iguodaro get a dunk on him, and then he was supposed to rotate over to Royce O'Neal in the corner off of a KD double team that was happening up top. And he was a solid like second and a half slow to that rotation. Royce O'Neal hit a couple of big corner shots, but that one was particularly devastating. So it's tough. I mean, you love 22 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists in the first half, but I think to win games consistently, they're going to need Mark Williams to be just as good in the first quarter as he is in the fourth quarter. And so, yeah, clutch possessions. They were turning it over. It wasn't just Mark Williams, although he did have a turnover. It was LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges as well. So, yeah, I mean, look, this is a team that has to do everything right. I mean, you look at that first Phoenix win. And I said it. They did everything right. They played elite ball down to a science. And in this one, they just let it slip in the last couple of minutes, and they don't have the talent necessary to win games when you let 4 minutes go by and play that badly. Phoenix does. Like, that's what Phoenix played badly not played badly, but didn't play their best for 3 quarters, but they had Kevin Durant, and Kevin Durant in the fourth quarter, particularly in that clutch time, was good enough.
Well, and one thing for me, look, if it wasn't Mark Williams or Miles Bridges hitting shots, then it was going to be really tough to come by made shots. I mean, LaMelo did not have a good shooting night. Brandon Miller did not have a good shooting night. You go to the bench, I mean, it was real tough sledding for them. Micic went 2 of 2. Nick Richards was 2 of 4, but even still, like, you're talking about the most made field goals coming from Nick Smith Jr. with 3 made field goals, but that came on 10 attempts. And so the bench, you see their plus minus, all of them in the minus, and all of them really in the minus double figures outside of Tijan Salon, who just picked up 6 minutes in this contest. So the bench, they did not play very well overall, I would say whatsoever. And it was tough because you only had 2 guys that were making shots at a high clip, and then here we are talking about one of the guys that made shots at a high clip in Mark Williams not being nearly as involved in the second half. I think they worked to take him out a lot more. I think the second half of this game against Phoenix looked a lot more like the first overall game against Phoenix at the Spectrum Center, where they were really working to take the big guy out of the offense entirely. But you're right. I do think we're still talking about Mark just not having enough conditioning under his belt, because it makes sense to me that the first half, after a pretty long break, Mark comes out like a bat out of hell. And then in the second half, he's a little bit of a step slow. This goes back to lower body injury, dude that already put on weight and is still not ready for 48 minutes of NBA conditioning. All that makes sense to me, given the injuries, given the conditioning, given the position and size in which he plays and is in the NBA. So the Hornets, they end up dropping this one in what was a winnable game. And again, it's talking about stalling out, right? No Mark, but 15 points in the fourth quarter. That's just, obviously, it's going to be really tough to win games when in clutch time you're only scoring 15. And we've seen these quarters pop up way too frequently, especially with what you see with their offensive numbers, advanced metrics, even just a good old-fashioned, did you put the ball in the darn hoop? 15 points in the fourth? No? Okay, it's going to be tough to win on the road.
Yeah, they couldn't do it. And in fairness to Mark Williams, I think you're right. Conditioning was a factor. I think that they were throwing 3 or 4 guys at him in the paint by the end of the game. Like, they were not going to let him get those same hard rolls. And generally, they were more physical. And Charles Lee mentioned this after the game. They were more physical up top. They were more physical with Mark Williams underneath. They were just getting hands on players that they weren't doing in the first half that allowed Charlotte to get off to that great start. Plus, Charlotte was like super rested. They came out with the right energy to start this game and then just couldn't finish it. And Nick Richards and Nick Smith Jr., the 2 Knicks, were really important in that first win, their performances, and they fell off. And I thought Nick Smith Jr. had a couple of plays that showed his youth and inexperience, a particularly awful pass that led to a turnover. And then Nick Richards, who is, currently, we'll talk about this in a minute, currently embroiled in trade rumors to the Phoenix Suns. This might be his new team in a week or so. He didn't play fantastic at all. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult because when the bench plays that poorly, it results in, I think, some of the interesting shot selection that we saw from LaMelo Ball in this game. A few of those that you go, I guess is that a good shot? There was no one under the basket. There was plenty of time on the shot clock. I don't know if that's a good, I've seen him make that shot before. I don't know if that's a good shot.
Well, I was going to bring it up in the next segment just like as a stat tease, but since you brought it up, it's too perfect to just mention here real quickly before we go to the next segment. But you see the 17 three-point field goal attempts in this game from LaMelo. That would have been a career high, Doug, coming into this year. But this year, it's just the norm. I mean, he's had 2 games back-to-back where he had 18 field goal attempts from distance. He had a 17 field goal attempt from distance game against Milwaukee on the road, 20 against Miami. That's his career high. 18 against Washington. And then against Phoenix, it says 16 on Basketball Reference. It says 17 on ESPN.com. Even so, lots of shots from three-point land and just not enough makes from him, not enough makes from other players outside of Mark, certainly if you consider his first half, and Miles Bridges, who, again, I continue to give some credit to for the way that he competes and the way that he's actually been somewhat of a rock for this team on the floor in terms of consistency.
There's an even crazier stat for LaMelo Ball that I will reveal in the next segment, but I just want to back you up on the not making enough because I put this in the Every Hornets box score game notes for this game. He's shooting 32.4% from 3 in his last 5, and he's shooting 31.7% in his last 10. Like that's there again. This is a complicated thing where like you can look at that and you can immediately blame LaMelo for some of these close losses, or you can zoom out and say, what else was he supposed to do except take some of these tough jump shots? I think he's an avatar right now for whatever you want to think about the Hornets. So, but look, I mean, those aren't great percentages.
No, let's get to that. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Speed's everywhere!
Yeah, I think what's still to come is a LaMelo conversation revolving the stats Doug and I just mentioned, and also a Mark Williams conversation. That's still to come here on LOH. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Basketball HC. I want to take a moment to introduce you to a brand new mobile game that I'm really excited about. Again, it's Ultimate College Basketball Head Coach, or HC for search engine purposes. If you've ever dreamed of being a college basketball head coach, this is your chance to step into those shoes. In Ultimate College Basketball HC, you control every detail of your program, from recruiting players, hiring the coaching staff, to overseeing training camps, handling NIL deals, managing scholarships, all of it. It's all in your hands. And when it comes to game time, you get to draw up offensive plays, you get to set your strategy, and the way you play won't just affect the current season, it will shape the future of your school's basketball program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. Here's a special offer for Locked On NBA listeners. Use promo code LOCKEDONCBB, all caps, inside the game store to get a free boost for your program. It's the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. To download Ultimate College Basketball HC, just visit ultimate-cbb.com, or you can look it up in the app stores. Ultimate College Basketball HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. This episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time?
Game time.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy, any of those things, man. I love going to them. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. I'm excited for a concert upcoming at Bank of America Stadium this year. Hello, Kendrick Lamar. The energy and excitement, it's unforgettable. Now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature called Game Time Picks. The feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets anymore. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Let's do the LaMelo conversation. You mentioned some of the percentages here with LaMelo. They are down from distance. You mentioned he's in the low 30s for both the last 5 games and since, what was the other mark that you had with that second stat that you mentioned? It was at the last 10 games.
Yeah, he's 32.4% in his last 5 from 3 and 31.7% in his last 10. But I have another crazy stat when you're ready.
Let's hear it. No, I'm ready. Let's hear it. What you got?
Okay, so he is taking the most shots per minute since Wilt Chamberlain in 1965. He's fifth all time right now in shots per minute. He's tied for fifth with guess who? Former, I guess, still part owner of the Charlotte Hornets, Michael Jordan in the 1985-86 Bulls season. If you don't remember the 85-86 Bulls season, how dare you? But there's a similarity to the Hornets. They're not very good, although let me look at this. So did they make the playoffs in 30 wins? That's crazy. No, that can't be right. Let me check this. No, 30-52. They finished fourth in the Central Division. The AI was trying to get me there. Basketball Reference has them at 30-52. That was not a good Michael Jordan Bulls team. They had not evolved into the Titan that they were going to be. Rod Higgins was on that team. Sorry.
Oh, my God.
I'm getting lost in a B-ref hole.
No, you're good. No, but it happens to the best of them. It happens to me. But yeah, so here we are talking about LaMelo taking so many field goal attempts. A lot of this has to do with the injuries because I'm looking at the game logs as well on Basketball Reference. Hopefully I don't go down the same rabbit hole that Doug did. But I think the point that I wanted to make talking about LaMelo putting up all these shots, Doug, I think having somebody else to handle the basketball alongside him that can create off the dribble, I think that's a big deal to rely on because I don't think Brandon Miller is showing you that. I think things got real wonky anytime Brandon would try to dribble into the paint against this Phoenix Suns team, who I think defensively, Doug, like over the last two games that we've seen these squads play against one another, they do make it really hard to put the ball down on the floor in the paint. Like they come in and they foul you, whether it's fouling, whether they're just, giving you active hands. Like they don't really give up a lot to you easily. At least they have it against the Hornets. Not that I've been watching a lot of Suns basketball this year, but against Charlotte, they've made it real hard. I also think we don't have enough of the requisite talent to beat that type of strategy from Phoenix. And I think Brandon Miller is struggling when he puts the ball on the floor. If you look at when Trey Mann went out, okay, somebody that can break you off of the dribble and get to his spots. Trey Mann's last game was against Detroit on November 21st. Well, it just so happens when you look at the uptick in LaMelo's shot attempts, he shot only 13 field goal attempts in that game against Brooklyn on November 19th. Which, remember, I think that was the game that we talked about LaMelo getting benched in the fourth quarter. But then November 21st, 27 field goal attempts, 38 against Milwaukee, 30 against Orlando, 35, oh my God, against Miami. And then he got hurt and didn't play for a little while. I do think that because this team is trying to find ways to beat guys off of the dribble, and again, they just don't have enough talent to do it. I think somebody like a Trey Mann actually is going to really help LaMelo not have to take as many shots, but also just even having their talent here too, right? Because now they have Brandon Miller, they have Mark Williams, they have Miles Bridges. You're seeing the field goal attempts go down for the most part. In the last 6 games that he's played, which has been a little back and forth with him being in and out of the lineup, you're looking at 15-32 against Washington, 18, 27, 20, 28. It's still a lot, but it's not as much as what we were talking about a little bit earlier in the season.
No, and I do want to go back to this comparison to these early Bulls teams that Michael Jordan was a part of. Now, in this season that I mentioned, 85-86, actually only played 18 games due to what I assume was injury. But just you read the roster of this team that he was on with the Bulls. Gene Banks, Ron Brewer, Tony Brown, Dave Corzine, George Gervin, Rod Higgins, Sidney Green. George Gervin, like 13 years experience.
Sure,
George Gervin,
right.
not
we know
the Iceman. He needed the ice bath by that point.
The ice bath man. I was trying to think of something. I don't think I'm going to be able to be ice bath man. That's good.
Rookie Charles Oakley. So there was nobody on this team, and I think we're going to look back other than Brandon Miller. I don't know who the Brandon Miller on this team. Maybe John Paxson. I don't know. I can't make John Paxson the comparison there. He's got Brandon Miller, but we're going to look back on this team and go, who? Like if Jeff Peterson is able to deliver in a way that Krause was able, and that crew was able to deliver, the ownership and the general management there were able to deliver for Michael Jordan, we're going to look back on this team and go, yeah, it's obvious why he was taking a ton of shots because he didn't have a lot of talent around him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because here we are. We're mentioning Brandon Miller a couple times. Do you want to just move on to Mark? Because I feel like there's something there with Brandon, but maybe we have a conversation about him tomorrow or some other day this week.
Well, I think I said everything that I wanted to say about Mark. It's obviously a conditioning issue. I'm just kind of in a wait and see mode with him. And but I also will point out when you talk about that dominant first half is that you're dealing with a team in Phoenix that was playing Kevin Durant at center. If Iguodala, Plumlee was getting dominated. They shelved Plumlee in the second half. Go to Iguodala. They're not playing Yusuf Nurkic anymore. They moved him to the bench and then DMP'd him, and now he's in trade rumors with Nick Richards that we can talk about next as well. But there's no center play for Phoenix. I need to see him do 22 and 13 and a half against a team that has a legitimate interior defense. That's what I want to see.
And that's fair, but also we should. We focused a lot on the second half. We should just take a step back and realize, oh my God, 22 and 13 and a half of basketball. We can just only say good things about that too. We can just take a little moment to set up camp and say, okay, you give me 22, 13 and 3 and a block. Maybe we just say good things about that performance. And then also, as we have, give context to what happened in the second half. But maybe we just set up camp for a moment and say, oh my God, 22 and 13, as Eric Collins said on the broadcast, that's a great game already. Going into the locker room, hell, he went to the bench with 5 minutes. And then he came back at the very end of that half and actually got a couple of free throw attempts. We can also just set up camp and say, oh my God, yeah, the stat line looks amazing. Thank you for your service, sir. We can do that.
Got to do it in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, got to do it in the playoffs, really. Once we get to the playoffs.
He did it on the road, at least for a half. You got to do it in the fourth quarter, and then you have to do it in the playoffs. And people were wanting the big dub hat after that first Phoenix win. And I said, got to keep the standards high. Got to do it on the road. Hornets couldn't do it on the road.
Yeah, get a ring, Mark. Then we'll celebrate you. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Yeah, we can move on. Some other rapid-fire observations. Plus, we got to get to the Nick Richards conversation, too. Nick Richards, a part of some trade talks. Shocker, the guy that is going to be a part of trade rumors every single offseason and really every single deadline. We'll get to him in just a moment here on Locked On Hornets. Before we get to Nick Richards, I want to tell you this episode is brought to you by Open Phone. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of hats, and your personal phone becomes your business phone. Before you know it, you're juggling customer calls all day and night, and as your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That's where Open Phone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, that's it. You get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. Open Phone works through an app on your phone or computer, and it integrates it with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, Open Phone is offering 20% off your first 6 months. Wow, it's a long time. When you go to openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA for 20% off for 6 whole months. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Nick Richards, we got some news about him, even heading into this game against Phoenix, Doug. Mark Stein, the Stein line, he used to be of ESPN. He's one of the better insiders that we've had over quite some time. Here's what Stein line reports. He says that the Suns have 3 tradable second-round picks in addition to a 2031 first to try to convince a team like Charlotte to take Yusuf Nurkic's contract for a package headlined by in-demand Nick Richards. That's the caveat he used. In-demand Nick Richards. But how many of those 3 picks would it cost them to go get a guy like Nick Richards? So let's hit the highlights again. The Suns have 3 tradable second-round picks to try to get Nurkic's contract off of the books. and they want Nick Richards, the in-demand Nick Richards. What do you make of the Steinline report?
Yeah, not only that, but then John Gambadoro, who is a sports radio guy, said on Twitter that they are discussing this, not have discussed it, are discussing it. Mm-hmm. And I believe that. I believe there are conversations around Nick Richards, not only with the Phoenix Suns, but I think there are probably discussions. If you're in demand, I think there are probably multiple teams calling about the availability of Nick Richards and how many second-round picks it would take. Now, Nurkic's contract is 18 and change this season, 19 and change next season. So if you do the math there, Nick Richards doesn't get the deal done. I think you've got to throw in a $7.5+ million deal. I think maybe Micic and Richards gets it done, or Cody Martin. I mean, you just got to throw something in there contract-wise, a few guys. But I think that they should keep the demands high for the second-round picks. I think it should. I would be thrilled with 3. I would be okay with 2. You can't just come back with 1 pick and Nurkic, who I don't know what I mean, obviously he would slot in as the backup center, but I don't know what the future of Nurkic in Charlotte really is in terms of next season.
So Nurkic is making $18.1 million this year. He's making $19.3 million, $19.4 million next year. So he would have a year and a half left on the books. You're talking about an expiring contract next year at, again, over $19 million. I wonder if what people have been rolling with on Twitter, at least on my timeline, does this turn into the Miles Bridges trade with Nick Richards as somewhat of a sweetener, which he's not even a sweetener, honestly. I mean, he's been talked about so much to where headline seems a little too much to say how to describe a Nick Richards trade, but it clearly becomes the Miles Bridges trade if he's involved in one of these things. Remember, Phoenix is one of those teams last year that was rumoredly interested in bringing Miles Bridges on, whether it be at the trade deadline or whether it be in the offseason. So is this something where you go to Phoenix, who is trying to shake some things up? They lost to Charlotte on the road. They almost, maybe even should have, but they certainly lost to, or they almost lost to Charlotte at home. We know that this is a squad that clearly has championship aspirations, and they do not have the championship type record. So do they want to switch it up so much? I don't know if going to the Hornets well is the way to do it, but if they take among the more talented players on the roster here in Charlotte, is that the way to do it? And is Miles Bridges a real part of this conversation, given their interest previously?
I would say probably not. I think their aspirations are more focused on Jimmy Butler right now. I think now if the Jimmy Butler stuff, if that just becomes financially impossible, then maybe they do turn their attention to Miles Bridges as a backup plan. But then again, what are they? Then it's less about second round picks, and are you getting a player back that makes any sense, more sense than Nurkic would? Although Nurkic can attempt and occasionally make a 3. He is not a great 3-point shooter, but he will toss it up there. It gives them an aspect to their center game that they don't currently possess. So then you're talking about Phoenix having to send a little bit more back in that situation, maybe a first-round pick. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, they don't have a first-round pick until 2031, which I think is part of the problem with them getting the Jimmy Butler deal. Things get so complicated. See, the Nick Richards swap would be less complicated for the Suns than anything that they've been, rumored to do with Jimmy Butler. Once you throw Miles Bridges in there, I think it gets much more complicated for them.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at more of the contracts. I think there's honestly some interesting stuff that you can do with Phoenix. One name that would be interesting to me is Grayson Allen. One of the examples I constantly went to with Charles Lee, I hear you, but one of the examples I went to with Grayson Allen, or with Charles Lee, I should say quite a bit, was when we would hear Charles do some of the team media stuff with Milwaukee. One of his bigger success stories was turning Grayson Allen into more than just a three-point shooter, like getting to the lane, really working with him quite a bit. Is that something you'd be interested in, even with his struggles this year? Like, I get Grayson has not been the same player as what landed him that contract, but I just wonder, like, bringing in, trying to resurrect some type of three-point crazy shooting with the experience that he already has with Charles Lee, I just wonder if that's the name that might be thrown out in all of this.
I will say, if you manage to bring back Grayson Allen and Yusuf Nurkic, you will have greatly increased your son of a bleep factor, right? I mean, those two guys, Nurkic has already been suspended for swinging on someone, and Grayson Allen doesn't purposefully get into fights, but he plays Mortal Kombat out there, like sweeping the leg, the bicycle kick in the air.
Tripping, sure.
Yeah, Grayson Allen plays Mortal Kombat. So you would become one of the more annoying teams to play almost automatically and instantly. And they don't have a lot of that, particularly since Grant Williams. Grant Williams was that guy for them. That would dust it up occasionally and just be annoying to play against. Not dirty, but just annoying to play against. And he, of course, tore his ACL, so he goes out. But, there aren't a lot of guys. You're seeing guys like Devin Booker, who also play like that, get into LaMelo's head, and there's no one else on the team that is really willing to step up and be that guy, that sort of like enforcer that you can afford to lose for like an ejection. Like, they don't have that guy, and Nurkic and Allen to a certain extent will play some of that role.
And by the way, I should just clean this up a little bit. But before this latest injury where Grayson was inactive for a little while, he was shooting like 37% from three, which isn't bad. It's just not the crazy like 47%, 43 that he shot last year, something ridiculous. But now he's shooting above 40 because he's going on a tear these last few games. So I just wonder with the Charles Lee connection, is that something he'd be pounding the table for? Or is Phoenix even interested in giving up a guy they just gave a decent amount of money to, and he opens up driving lanes for guys that also like to take a lot of mid-range jumpers in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant? The only reason I bring his name up is because of the link between head coach and Grayson, but and also the money is something where you can match with a Miles deal. But yeah, I mean, it probably would not happen.
Well, not only head coach and Grayson, but ownership group and Duke. They love Duke. They took camp to Duke this year. Maybe they acquire Grayson, they draft Cooper Flagg, and this becomes hilariously, the ownership change becomes the meme switches from they always take Carolina players, which wasn't really that true. They always took Kentucky players. Then it switches to now the Charlotte Hornets only take Duke players.
Yeah. So like Nick Richards, Miles Bridges, with Miles making 27 this year, Nick making 5. For, I don't know, you like go with Grayson Allen making 15, and you go Nurkic, who's making 18. That gets it done. Like that's pretty damn perfect. It's like 32, 33 million a pop for both of those players. So yeah.
I mean, what I always say, you just ruined it. You ruined it by saying it, because once you say the deal, it just never I've never once voiced a deal that even came close to happening. I'm not talking about nailed it exactly. Just once I just speak the deal I speak it out of existence. I can't speak it into existence. Maybe you can. Maybe you have powers that I don't have. But typically once these things get voiced or written about, they just never happen.
By the way, you'd be getting picks back if you're Charlotte, because you're getting rid of Miles, who I think is the better player of all of them. So, I mean, with Grayson, maybe you value the shooting more, but you'd be getting picks back. It wouldn't just be straight up salary match, 2 players for 2 players. Like, you'd be getting some picks here from Phoenix just to clear that up for everybody.
And any players they get back, I'm cool with the team taking bad money for if money goes out. I'm fine with taking a couple of years. I don't know if Grayson Allen and Nurkic are the exact players that I want, but in terms of like, if you were asking me what kind of players do you want, I'm not even looking for necessarily like, well, this type of forward who plays this certain way. I think they can make those more significant moves in this upcoming offseason and in the draft too. But like, I think they should be targeting players that play with an attitude, that play more physical, because that's what they're missing most. It's not like, I mean, shooting as well, but like that, to me, you go and find those son of a bleeps, and the 2 guys that you just mentioned definitely fall into that category.
Yeah, and Nurkic would be the bad contract that just warrants the picks as well. Like, no, but you're bringing picks back if you're welcoming Nurkic to your roster. All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast. That does include YouTube. We'll get to some Sicko Satchel stuff tomorrow, maybe a Brandon Miller discussion, some draft talk. We almost have tomorrow's show already planned, baby. So I'm excited about that one. You should be too. Again, make us your first listen anywhere you get your podcast. That includes YouTube. And make sure you check out Doug's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. Also listen to Locked On NBA. I'm Walker Mehl. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.